Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming. We're two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything, decided to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And on this episode, we're going to continue down the path of doing general faction focuses from a lore perspective, eventually for all the factions in Warhammer 40K, ideally. And we're trying to start with the big hitters, though. Because, let's be honest, you start with the stuff that people know and then you get into the niche things. And we've already knocked out the Imperium, and we've knocked out Chaos on both of those on the grandest, least detailed scale. But now, John, I think we got to get a bit more topical.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a bit more chitinous.
More, buggy.
A little segmented, if you will.
A little, like, swarming all over the place here.
A bit Thoraxian.
Those are a big word for a really simple show.
Yeah, we're talking about bugs! I don't know if Thoraxian's a word, I ain't gonna lie to you. I took thorax and put an ending on it. I put
Congratulations.
onto a word I know is right, and I guessed. Sometimes Jesus takes the wheel when you're talking.
That's a fantasy concept now. Let's go.
Thoraxian? Yeah, sounds like a Magic the Gathering race. But we're talking about Tyranids. The thoraxiest faction in the game. What? Don't give me that look. It's true. Give no counter. And it's topical because they are a big deal right now. In the lore and in the tabletop game. They're going to get a big range refresh, all sorts of kits that are... Some that are brand new models, some that are new kits for old models that really needed a little bit of love. And I have a feeling some people out there, if you're new to the game, might have gotten half of a Leviathan box and maybe be considering playing some Tyranids. And if you're going to play Tyranids, you gotta know the lore pitch.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The Tyranids are like an older faction in the game that I think a lot of people realize. It's also... like a core fundamental part of like sci-fi, right? Like we know from all sorts of different sci-fi things. There's like the Flood, there's the bugs from Starship Troopers, there's all sorts of gribblies out there. Alien.
Like, that's like, bugs, for me, that's my touch point. That and Starship Troopers.
Yeah, like bugs in space is a big trope for sci-fi. And this is 40Ks. And they are great. I don't know how to explain other than they are just massive bioships that arrive to a planet and wipe it clean. And like, I love them.
It's rough. It's rough. Because normally, like on the show, we like to start with like a faction and their history and like where they come from, their origins, stuff like that. So that you can get an understanding of the early motivations and what shapes them into who they are now. But there is no history for the Tyranids, which is part of what starts to like build this sandcastle of horror that makes them so scary. And it's that, honestly, we know very little about them in the setting with any concrete specificity. There are scholars in the Imperium who have like taken guesses about where they might come from, but largely, all that we know for sure is that they are not from here, and they are coming in from another galaxy. And, to the best of everyone's knowledge, their only goal is to consume. They want to consume minerals, they want to consume organic compounds, they want to consume living organisms. Plants, microbiology, anything big or small, doesn't matter, they want it. Including you. And by God, they're scarily good at getting it.
Even their own allies, like they will, little side tangent, they'll even eat like genes to their cults that prepare worlds for them. Like eat the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah. Like there's many stages to like an invasion, but the general idea is that they show up in a system with these colossal hive ships that are living organisms in and of themselves. They look like colossal monsters that float through space with these gnashing maws and like giant guns. And then they get to a world and they start disgorging these pods onto the planet of their initial shock troops, their first bugs to make landfall, and they start attacking whatever defenses that planet might have. And they just keep pumping down organisms and laying waste to everything that tries to resist them. And as they start dropping more and more, they get faster at replenishing and they overwhelm you in bodies, or they rapidly adapt to whatever your strategy is and beat you that way. And then after the defenders are dead, they eat all of the bodies. They jump into an acid pit that then kills the bug that ate the bodies. And then bug and bodies all get dissolved and pumped back up into the ship. And hopefully, the assault was a net positive on biomass, and off they go to the next planet, leaving a lifeless rock behind them.
And it's important to, I think, point out that they don't do this like in an animalistic fashion. Like, if you take an individual Tyranid organism, it is like animalistic generally, unless it's specifically a synapse creature, which is a creature. Yeah, it's a creature that interacts with the hive mind. Right? Like, they are all interconnected together. So when one Tyranid sees a thing, it's like they all see a thing, and they all now know about it. And decisions get made on a large scale, almost like the hive mind's playing an RTS. Like, it's nuts. And most of the time, their invasions will start with something like the Lictors or Gene Stealers, who like come down and prepare things. And then from there, you just have hordes and hordes and hordes and hordes of Gaunts, followed up by Tyranids, keeping them, investigating, and then to get into the big thing that Joe loves.
Oh, I love big bugs. Yeah. Giant monsters. God, they have some cool ones. My personal favorite from the fluff is the Carnifex. God, it is indestructible. It's simple. It's a colossal bug, but not so big that it's expensive to create. And it's dumb as a box of rocks, but if you like have a synapse creature there to like hard control its brain, that doesn't matter. And it's got big crushing talons and claws that you could swap out as needed. And you send them in waves like these 20-foot tall stampeding rhinos to break the enemy's formations by headbutting them or stabbing them. And the enemy's gonna kill them, and that's fine, because you pump them out.
Yeah, they're like almost like a main battle tank, if you want to think of it like that, like in a military sense. And they get followed up by all sorts of like unique big bugs too. Like, it's not just one big bug; it is big bugs for every possible thing you would need a big bug for, like from below assaults, for air assaults, and generally these assaults are led by something called a hive tyrant, which is these massive bugs that are like very, very, very good strategists.
Yeah. They're like, all of the collective strategic knowledge of the entirety of the hive mind is like hard shunted into this colossal bug's brain. And then it can use that in field to make decisions. And it also is a synapse bug, meaning it reaches into the mind of everything around it, hard locks it down, and now everything answers it like its own hands or limbs.
Yeah, and
very scary to face.
And one of the things that makes this faction so unique and interesting is that we've listed off a bunch of bugs, right? Like, we've listed off a bunch of things, and they're always releasing new types of organisms for the fleet, and it's always different.
Yeah, because in like setting, their power is rapid evolution. Like, that's what they encounter a strategy on a planet, some sort of challenge. And they, because of the hive mind leading them, like this colossal intelligence, it will just, where they're pumping out these bugs, start making changes. If you're hitting them with a bunch of heat weapons, what do you know? They're now heat resistant because of a new sort of fatty coating on all of their shells. That's a problem for you. Or if, oh no, you've gone and hid in the water. Well, everything's coming out with fins and webbing now. Oh no. Like, they will rapidly respond, and that also means sometimes they just put out whole new creatures entirely, rather than taking an existing one and modifying it.
Yeah, like the newest one, or I should say two, the Norn Emissary and the Norn Simulator, which are just these massive, almost knight-sized Tyranids that run forward and do very specific jobs, and that is be big and break lines.
And specifically answered to the Norn Queen, which is
Yes.
like, if you think of the hive mind as an all-encompassing, like, top point of a pyramid, there are then, like, hive ships that are led by, like, each tendril, you could think of that like a fleet, has a Norn Queen that is sort of like the node of which, like, the hive mind all runs through in this, like, collective supercomputer network thing. And the Norn is kind of like the Zerg. It is their queen, their decision maker, the end-all be-all. It decides what gets produced and where it goes. And now it has a creature that is its own right hand to go deal with particular problems if she decides that something is messing up her calculations. And that's no good for the Imperium.
No.
Because it was already hard to resist the Tyranids, and by God have they done it a few times. God, because there's so many bugs. It's just, there's so many bugs. And,
Yes.
And also, they're hard to resist. Like, even for the Imperium. Which is why it's been so bloody every time they've fought.
There's no cutting supply lines. There's no, like, stalling them out or diplomacy or appeasing them. There is just weathering the storm of what they are or glassing the planet. Which is, unfortunately, a lot of what ends up happening is, like, they end up glassing whole planets to slow them down or starve them out, or, like, make a massive one-man, like, last stand.
Yeah, you're playing a game of math now. Can you take more biomass out of the swarm than the swarm can obtain? Mm-hmm. And it's now entirely down to grinding them out from afar, if possible.
And especially with the way the Imperium fights, they don't fight worrying about what resources they're expending. Generally, they just throw bodies at the problem until it's solved. But that's just not what you can do right now.
No. And I think that's where I kind of want to get into and spend a lot of time. Like, so generally speaking, you know that they're big giant tendrils that want to eat, and they go from, like, sector to sector. There's a number of tendrils they're attacking from many different places, which means they've hit a lot of different planetary sectors. They've consumed a shocking amount of them, because once they're on planet, they're hard to stop. But the Imperium has pulled it off a few times, particularly when the tendril hits a sector or a planet that is too valuable to let lose. For example, the Ultramar sector got attacked once in the War from a Crag, where the Ultramarines chapter had to go toe-to-toe with the Tyranids, and they ended up winning, barely. And that was on their chapter planet, where they had all of their supplies and every available advantage in their favor. And fighting an enemy who really didn't know their tactics yet. And they still almost lost.
Mm-hmm.
At an entire chapter strength. Or one of my favorite Warhammer novels called Devastation at Baal. Similar idea, but on the Blood Angels planet, where the Tyranids came to siege it and to wipe them out. And the Blood Angels could not hold them out on their own. They called every successor chapter they had back home, and they threw every single Space Marine they had at it. Still couldn't beat them. On their home turf, with all their supplies.
With all their heroes, with all of their, like, centuries-old warriors and ancient rites and weaponry and powerful super weapons.
Still couldn't do it. Like, I'm a Blood Angels fan. Like, I love the book. I think it ends great. But they couldn't beat them. They lost. If Chaos hadn't intervened, I mean, it would be GG. They're a scary, scary threat, even in these sort of disorganized tendrils attacking a planet. But now, the problem is that these tendrils have learned. They attacked Macragge. They attacked Baal. They've attacked a number of Imperial worlds. They've started to learn how the Imperium fights, how the Imperium defends, how the Imperium reacts to threats, and how long it takes. And unfortunately, the hive mind has seen an opportunity. There is currently a giant rift into the warp that has split the galaxy in half. slowed down Imperial response time significantly. Even just communication is hard. And the hive mind has made a blitz attack. And out from underneath the galactic plane, if you think of it sort of horizontally with like galaxy spread out and planets all over, they're attacking from below, which people weren't expecting. And now seems like they are heading for Terra, the home world of humanity.
Yes.
Which is the most red alert danger threat you could have.
Well, like you were talking about the devastation of Baal, and I think it's important to call out that tendril was named Leviathan, right? That attacked, it was effectively like the northeast part of the galaxy. And now Leviathan is back much sooner than anyone would expect them to return from the southwest quadrant of the galaxy, which, you know, does kind of say, A, can they A, move that number of things that fast, or B, are they just surrounding the galaxy?
Yeah,
are they just probing in to try to break what is effectively a giant siege?
No one knows. I personally think they're just way bigger in perpetuity than we think. Like, that these are forward little fingers of a much bigger organism that has not broken into the galactic plane yet. And God forbid it does.
Yeah, I think that like one of the things that makes this faction so interesting is that they are the end, right? Like they are the concept of apocalypse in a setting full of mini apocalypses constantly. Like everything is a terrible nightmare end of the world situation, but this is the end of the world situation. Nothing lives from this. Nothing defeats this. Even other factions see this, right? Like the oldest faction in the game, like chronologically, is the Necrons, right? They're immune to most of the Tyranid stuff because they're not biomass, and even they fear for what this means. And their leader, the Silent King, is willing to scour the galaxy to stop this threat.
Because if you have to think of it like a snowball going downhill. Like if they start rolling and they start taking up whole segments of the galaxy, they're going to have a lot more biomass. And that means they're going to have so many more forces, and they're going to be much more intelligent, and they're going to have so much more battle data. And that's going to make their next conquest easier and easier and easier. And very quickly, even the Necrons would just be wiped out. And I think even for Chaos, this is a red alert threat. Because, like, oftentimes for stuff like orcs, Chaos is less concerned because in the end, like, it's still going to be violence and, like, Khorne, bloodshed, and bodies from Nurgle, and, you know, all of that stuff. Chaos will still be around if, like, the orcs won, so to speak. But if the Tyranids win, Chaos, I think, ceases to be. There will be nothing alive to worship them. Nothing. No humans. 0 humans.
Not to mention that the Tyranids have like a psychic resonance, but they don't tap into it the same way because they have something called the Shadow in the Warp that disrupts like chaos, which is insane. Like the ramifications haven't even been really explored in the setting itself about what that truly means.
Yep.
And we've seen some nutty like psychic stuff happen from the Tyranids, including them like consuming Eldar and creating these massive brain bugs that are just horrifying.
Best guess is it's a manifestation of the sort of like intellectual cerebral processing power of the hive mind made manifest, just like oppressively pushing on reality with the vast power of its understanding, which disrupts this sort of like feeling of spirit and belief because they don't have that. It doesn't exist. Not for this hive mind.
And to sum up some of the stuff that's going on currently in the setting that makes this very interesting is that you have these heroes like, not Constantine Valdor, what's his name? Trojan Valoris.
Trajan,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Trojan Valoris having to work with the Lord Solar and push westward with as many people as they can get a hold of to try to stem the tide of what is an unkillable wave coming to Terra, where they've created multiple Bastion worlds that have just fallen, right? And fallen and fallen.
Yeah, it's the defense of like desperate sacrificial last stands, and every one of them has the goal of buying the Imperium just seconds.
And for years, people were like, "Oh, the Imperium wins all the time. What do you mean it's grimdark? The Imperium wins all the time. What do you mean it's grimdark?" Even though it was like they're all Pyrrhic victories, where like no one really won. But like in this instance, they've spent billions of lives for months, and it still keeps coming. It took some of the most powerful people the Imperium have access to slow them down enough where they can maybe get a defense organized.
Even marshaling the Custodians, the most elite, never deploy force the Imperium has. The best of the best, the golden boys, the demigods of war in mass. Still, all they've been able to do is kill key targets and leaders, make a couple of, like, pinpoint surgical strikes at key locations to buy more time, but they haven't been able to sever the head from the snake. Not by a long shot.
And where this leaves us currently in the setting is, like, the end of the most recent books, which is, like, the 5th Tyrannic War, is in the middle of that, right? Like, we don't know the ending. It's going to keep going. They're going to add more lore to it. So I think we're going to end up seeing novels like the, Devastation of Baal, but, like, set in the Tyrannic War, which would be amazing.
Yeah. If it's anything like Devastation of Baal, I'm in. It's so good. By the way, novel recommendation if you're into Blood Angels. Hell of a book.
And Tyranids. Boom.
And done. Tyranids. It's a great Tyranid novel, really. Like, because Tyranids don't have their own book because you never know their own perspective because they are entirely alien. So, like, the idea of even having wants is non-existent. There is no want. It is only consume and serve the hive mind. So you can't have characters who have personalities and needs and desires because there's none of that. It is only existence and eat. So instead, the only Tyranid books you get are watching someone get to grips with the horror of what they're fighting, which I think honestly touches on exactly why I think they're compelling, especially in this setting. Like, let's be honest, there's a lot of antagonists like Chaos who can be negotiated with, and like they're trying to corrupt you slowly. They want things, they have rules, and you could kind of play them against each other. And they're schemy and backstabbers. Ain't none of that here. The bugs do not want. Bugs do not have pride. The bugs do not have honor. The bugs do not have these concepts. The Tyranids want to eat. They cannot be negotiated with. They do not feel fear. It's just an animal looking to consume.
And, like, the faction as a whole is so divorced from the concept of, like, human. Like, even some of the other alien races in 40K have, like, humanoid elements to them. The closest thing you have to humanoid elements in Tyranids are lictors, which are built to kind of stealthily infiltrate a planet and kill leaders. Or gene stealers, which are, like, humanoid-esque with, like, 4 arms and 2 legs. And they form, like, cults that insidiously rot from within, which we'll touch on in another video. But, like, it is a truly alien faction. Like, if you're looking for something that is not normal, that is very unique, very different, Tyranids is, like, the thing.
Yeah, they're so simple and straightforward that they are uniquely horrifying. Like, if written in a different way, I feel like the idea that, like, oh, it's just here to eat stuff would be kind of boring, but the scale at which they're here to eat and the lack of changeability in their motivations, it really just makes them an unstoppable force that you have to meet head on or lose. And that's scary. That's horrifying. And also, God, they have cool models now for the new stuff. Like,
they're gorgeous.
What a great model line for the new models. Some of the old models, I was not a fan, but new models look great. And if you're a new player, also, This is, like, we do these from a lore perspective, but also from a hobby perspective. Highly recommend them. They do really well with stuff like washes or contrasts and speed paints. Slapchop, you might have seen if you just, like, started YouTubing around on, like, beginning painting. They take well to all of that stuff. So, if you're a new player, also a big benefit there.
Absolutely.
It's a nice thing. After this, now that we've talked about the Tyranids, which, like, have no motivation and no personality and no fun, because it's all business, it's a little much for me, John. I've been here reading a bunch of notes and thinking about battle strategies and talking about, like, big brain powers, and I just can't take it anymore. I think I need to be a little green.
You gonna tell everybody that our next video is gonna be orcs?
It's gonna be orcs! I've been waiting. I have so much to say. I don't know how I'm gonna get it down to under 8 hours, but I'm gonna do my best. We're gonna give it a shot. For now, that's been all of our opinions, bona fide and Kentucky Fried. I cannot wait to see you on the next one. Orcs, 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 orcs.